So I'm a general adjuster with Sedgwick. I've worked in insurance in 30 plus years. Kind of feels like I'm coming full circle here. My first job in insurance was a workers' compensation company. We were not in a big, beautiful building like this. We were downtown, kind of a scary neighborhood, but it was a moderately dangerous job. It was the only job where I've ever had somebody actually come after me. So I can tell you why they have a serious security guard here. We were sitting in a conference room, and a claimant was very upset with me, and she picked up a stapler and threw it at me. Hard enough that it stuck in the door. So that was an interesting experience. Anyway, what I do is complex and large loss for the most part. I'm going to tell you kind of what we do, which is not going to be terribly interesting. You're just going to hear insurance, stuff, kind of, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to show it to you in real world, which is what we really do. When we work a complex and large loss, I wanted to introduce you somebody. This is Jed Mortensen. Say hi, Jed. He's my compadre. He works with me. I travel quite a bit now, so sometimes if I can't be on your scene immediately, Jed is here, and sometimes he can take care of things until I can actually get back to the state or back to your area where you can start working on your loss. But I wanted to introduce you to him, and he's here to heckle me if needed. So, when we work with large complex loss, we don't really do anything different than if your basement flooded. We are looking at the very basics: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who. Is it the named insured or someone owed a duty by the named insured? What occurred? Coverage is usually determined based on occurrence or what we call peril, or it is an all-risk policy with named exclusions. Why? What failed? Who installed it? Who serviced it? What other parties could be at fault? This is a big thing. I'm going to mention the word subrogation over and over and over again in this presentation. Subrogation to insurance companies is where we determine what may have occurred and if there's anyone else at fault. Insurance companies love to invite all other parties that may have had something to do with the cause of this incident into a claim, and then they will invite their insurance companies into it. It's a big part of what we do. When does this particular incident fall under a period of time when the policy was actually enforced? Where? Is it an insured property, or is it property in transit, or is it property stored off-site? These different things will determine what kind of coverage is in place and during what period of time, and how. What's the basic mechanism of failure? Large losses, or any loss, occur because there was a failure of something. We employ a bevy of experts. Sometimes I feel like we're quarterbacking a team. We employ a lot of engineers, mechanical, electrical, civil, structural, geotechnical. We employ attorneys for contract review, subrogation, like I mentioned. They do a lot of our subrogation reviews and putting people on notice, and we involve CPAs a lot, especially for loss of income and business loss, stuff like that. But at the same time we're doing this, we show up at the loss. First thing I'm going to do is probably call you and just get some very initial information. What happened? Where did it happen? What do you think caused the loss? When we show up, what we're going to do is we're going to determine what's damaged, what is the most effective, time-efficient, and cost-effective way to mitigate and restore the property damages, business, personal property, and your loss of income. Many different words there. Mitigation. Mitigation is the initial process of immediately securing, structurally boarding up, fencing, drying, removing damaged items, bringing the structure to a stable condition. This is really important. You guys are probably going to call a mitigation vendor before I'm ever notified of a claim. Or, you probably call Corby and they're working on the paperwork, and sometimes we don't get involved or even know about it until 2 or 3 days later. So you've already called somebody to come into your building or work on your property before I can get there. It's really important that you find out some of the vendors in your area. Who can you work with? Set up relationships with some of these people and find out what their resources are. You may or may not want to sign contracts with these people. If you determine that you want a vendor or somebody you're confident with, and you want to sign some kind of a special contract with them so that they will respond to you, especially in a situation where we have an area of large loss, a flood, where we've got, thousands of homes and businesses flooded all at the same time. You want somebody that you can call who is going to be specifically responsive to your particular situation. Make sure you're very careful when you sign contracts with these people. You can sign a work authorization, which they will require you to sign before they show up at your property and actually start working. Be very careful that you're not signing contracts that include, you will pay our equipment at the charge cost. It makes it really difficult for us to negotiate discounts on the back end. If you've signed a contract with a contractor stating that you're going to pay whatever they're going to charge, that makes it very hard for us. The insurance companies are going to pay what is reasonable and necessary to put your building back together based on the policy conditions. The contractor can charge you whatever they want. What we don't want to see is a delta between those two numbers that you're going to be stuck with and have to pay off. So, just be careful. Go ahead.
Most mitigation vendors also understand what they can do and what they can't do until you get a cause and origin investigation done, because you need to do those, especially with fires, to find out what the source was.
And that's the second thing I was going to mention. Cause and origin investigation is critical. If you've got a multi-million-dollar loss and you've got a fire, say, you don't want a vendor who is going to come in and immediately start pulling everything out of that room and rearranging all of the evidence. It is critical that we see that evidence as it is. We're going to call for a cause and origin inspection. We may call engineers. We have to put all of the other parties that may be need to be notified that they might be sued down the road because they did some kind of service on that particular product. We need to allow them to be there to inspect this in the condition it is at the time of loss. We have to offset that by the fact that you can't just leave a pipe, spraying water. You've got to do what you've got to do to get your building, to a place of a stable condition. So be really cognizant of that. If you have to make repairs to something, emergency repairs to something, take videos, take pictures, save any parts that you have taken out of, the area where something has failed. There are many, many times I've gone back and I've been able to get pictures from the fire department or sheriff's office or insured on the policy who just went into the room, saw the damages, and took some pictures. Those pictures become critical evidence 5 years down the road when we're sitting in court working out subrogation, who's responsible for what. And these things take years. They go down the road years. I just extended a mediation for a claim I worked in 2013, 2 weeks ago. So this stuff, it has a long time frame before it ends. But if we can do something up front that will get you your money back, that's a very, very valuable service that we can provide for you. Once the building is stable, what we want to do is work on a plan for restoration. What will be needed? What are the cost-effective options? Is there code upgrade required? Do we have hazmat kind of a situation? Can portions of the building be used while the repairs are taking place? Most of you work in, county government, so you're not going to be looking at a large loss of income, but sometimes you are looking at a loss of income. What can we do to mitigate that loss of income? There have been several times at a large loss where we have actually moved a business 6 blocks down the road so that they can continue business. If their building is going to be out of service for a year, that puts them out of business. They're done. So what can we do to mitigate some of those circumstances, keep you up and running? And you guys run critical services for the general population. What can we do to, put you back in business as fast as you could possibly get there? We use construction consultants for this, a lot of times, especially in large loss. And these are people who are leaders in the construction industry. Most of them work for large construction companies. They've been construction managers, and they have ideas sometimes that we wouldn't think of. hey, we did this in Florida, it worked, well, we can try it here, make it work for you. Loss of income. Loss of income is kind of a separate category altogether. There are very definitive deductibles. They can be time or monetary. Maximum time frames on some of these, and these are, complex calculations at times to come up with. The other thing that we're looking at when you're on the property is it insured to value? If I roll up onto a property and it's a 30-story building, beautiful hotel, and they've got $10 million in coverage, you got a problem. If you're only insuring 10% of your property, they're going to pay 10% of your claim. So just make sure that you're kind of up to date on what your values are. It normally isn't taken into consideration in a small loss. It's not something that we're looking at very closely or very carefully, but in large losses, this is looked at pretty carefully. What are your general conditions of the building? We are required to report the general conditions of the building when we go in. Is your roofing in good condition? Are your steps falling apart? These are things that will be noted when we show up and report it back to the insurance carrier, which will then go back to underwriting. And these things are followed up on. Hey, we need to be charging more premium, or we need to notify them that they've got 12 months to replace that roof. These things, they do fall back to the carriers. After our initial visit to the site, I am required to get on the phone immediately with the insurance company. And sometimes this isn't just one insurance company. With you guys, we are working on a policy where you've got a self-insured retention up to, I don't know, what is it, 250,000 or something like that locally. It then falls to a national program where the retention is then at 500,000 or $1 million, where an insurance carrier kicks in, who takes a layer between $1 and $3 million. So depending on how large the loss is, I can have 10 or 12 bosses on this. And we have to report to all of them and let them know immediately. Is reinsurance going to be required? How many parties do we have to notify? And it becomes quite a bit more complex at that point in time. When I make that initial phone call to the carrier or whoever is going to be involved, we have to immediately be able to answer who, what, when, where, why, and how. Determine what experts are going to be required, put in a request and a reason for each of these experts, and obtain a preliminary budget for each one of the experts. We have to be able to identify all the players involved. Is this an owned building and the owner is doing business in the particular building? Do we have a tenant in the building? Did they have clients in the building who are not employed in the building? It makes a difference on the other side of the policy, the general liability policy. If someone was in your building when the damage occurred and they were injured, you need to notify your general liability carrier if they're not the same carrier, but we need to put these people on notice because they want to start their investigation at the same time and we may run our investigations concurrently. I need to be able to set what we call a rough order of magnitude. What do I think, after being at the building, that this loss is going to cost at the end of the day? This is a very rough number at this point in time. And this comes more with just years of experience, showing up, doing it over and over and over again. We eventually, within 30 days, will actually bring some numbers together with a construction consultant and put what we call this estimated number of, amount of damages, and we will send that to the insurance carriers and the appropriate parties. This is critical for them because if they do not have adequate reserves on hand for the losses that they are going to have to pay out over time, the state insurance commissioner will shut them down and they won't be in business anymore. So the reserving process is very, very important to what we do. At that point in time, we need to do a policy review, and sometimes we're dealing with more than one policy. In the self-insured retention, the layers, sometimes we're dealing with what we call market claims, where especially when you have a large number of buildings and a lot of dollar amount, you won't get one insurance company that's going to come in and say, yeah, we'll insure all of this will be great. They won't do that. What you'll have is you'll have 12 different insurance companies and they each take a percentage of the policy. AIG will have 12%, FM Global will have 22%, So there are a lot of layers, there are a lot of different things that have to look at. We need to look at each one of these policies and we need to determine, are we looking at any coverage questions? Those are things we need to report back to you immediately, We've got some coverage concerns here. This is the policy language that it deals with because you're going to need to know if part of this loss is not going to be covered under any particular insurance policy. Determine if there are other policies that could be in place that could cover it. Mechanical breakdown, boiler and machinery, tenants usually have coverage on their business personal property and their enhancements to the building, different things like that. And then we need to determine the length of time that it's going to take to do the repairs. We find in claims, the faster we can put you back together, the cheaper it's going to be. And it's just a tale on these things, but that's the way the math just adds up. What you can do basically to help us really is when I call and give me some information about the building. You guys know these buildings, you're experts there. And so when I call and say, when was it built? What kind of remodeling have you done? What I'm asking is, when was it built? Because I want to know, was it built since 1975 and has a popcorn texture ceiling that probably has asbestos? You know? Some of these things. Who's been working on the building? Take pictures, take photographs, take video. Keep us notified when the process is taking place. If something unusual happens, don't wait a month to call me, tell me. I don't need to know if a contractor's 10 minutes late. They're contractors. They're going to be late. They're not going to be on time. They're not going to finish on time. Things come up. But if something happens and we decide, we're going to do flood cuts in 17 rooms, and then you start doing flood cuts and find, oh my gosh, we had a problem in this bathroom, and it looks like we have mold all the way up the wall. We have no idea. That's something that we probably do need to know about. And that way we can properly inform the carriers, and we can properly set a reserve for those kinds of things and determine, what we need to do. Anyway, so having said all that, that's all blah, blah, blah. I'm going to show you practical application. These are cases that I've worked, some of them recently, some not so recently. This is a 500,000 square foot warehouse. This was recently built, and the tenant was getting ready to move into this building, and this is what the roof looked like. Yeah. So we've got 2 heat pumps there, HVAC units, and we've got a pretty serious problem. The building was vacant at the time of the loss, which was good because the inside looks like this. If that had been full of inventory, which it would have been in 2 weeks, we would have had a $10 million loss. As it is, it's probably a $2 million loss. The tenant had done some renovations, so 75,000 square feet of this was offices, conference rooms, bathrooms, and it all looked like this. Because the units that burned were actually directly above where all the offices were. So the first thing, our biggest question here is, nobody's living in the building. Stuff is just barely being turned on. What happened here? What's our cause of loss? What happened to these units that caused this to occur? We immediately employed an electrical and mechanical engineer who went to the scene and took a look at the units. The cursory inspection, there's no destructive testing done on it. We had to get a structural engineer in the building first to allow us access to the roof, because as you can see from back here, which is just because I have a really great zoom lens, you can't really walk over there. We also had to, in this particular case, we needed to determine which policy this falls under. This is a brand new building. Did they receive a certificate of occupancy or a provisional certificate of occupancy? That switches the policies. When you get a certificate of occupancy, it moves it from a builder's risk policy to a commercial property policy. So we had to make a determination on which policy this would be covered under, and they are very different policies with very different versions. They started getting the mitigation people in place. We got the tenant involved, and we're able to get the lease agreement because we had to make a determination on what was owned by the building owner and what was owned by the tenant. So these 2 things had to occur pretty much simultaneously. The mitigation vendor started work. We were able to get the mitigation done within 14 days on this building, which was pretty rapidly. We're looking at a very serious loss of business income on this one. They were scheduled to move into the building within the next week. So we based on the loss of business income, determined that any overtime, nights, weekends, holidays, that we could work people to get this building back up and running, it's going to be worth the money to do that. We have to justify that expense on the back end. Why are you spending an additional $120,000 to bring this up? Oh, because we're losing $80,000 in loss of rents by not doing this. When it came time to actually take a look at these units on the roof, I'm going to give you a list of everybody that attended this inspection. We employed a subrogation attorney, a big firm in Chicago, to notify all of the parties who would have been involved in this particular, putting these units on the roof, servicing them, testing them, everybody who may have had involvement in this. And so at the time of our original inspection, we went up and did the initial inspection with all of our experts. We had the building owner, represented by the property manager. We had the building owner's insurance representatives. We had the building owner's expert, which were the electrical and mechanical engineers. We had the general contractor that completed the building, which was the shell before the build out by the tenant. We had the tenant's insurance representatives. We had the contractor who completed the tenant improvements, offices, and additional HVAC and electrical. We had the subcontractor who completed the HVAC work on the building, the insurance representative for the HVAC contractor, the engineer hired by the HVAC contractor's insurance company, the manufacturer of the rooftop unit, the HVAC company that completed the emergency repairs to restore gas and electricity to the remaining part of the building. It's cold, it's winter, we don't want pipes freezing after that. He was there, and the mitigation contractor was there, and the roofer was there. So that's how many people had to be involved in this one inspection. But every single one of those parties had to be put on notice. If we had come in and destroyed this evidence, we don't have any possibility of subrogation at that point in time, finding out who's responsible. Everyone signs in, everybody signs out, everybody agrees to all the work being done. 2 weeks later, we pulled these off the roof by crane, all the parties reassembled, saw it come off the roof by crane, packaged it up, and it's being stored in a warehouse right now where a destructive testing inspection will occur with all of these same parties again. That's how important it is that you save evidence. Building was dry 2 weeks. We're putting it back together now. And, anyway, that's real life. That's how these things roll. This particular one is this is a large commercial building. It's 20-something stories. We're going 300 feet or more up in the air. This is a fire suppression pipe in the basement of this building. A box truck backed up and hit this particular elbow on this fire suppression pipe. Open the pipe.
It is getting really difficult to hear you in the back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you?
Hold on. Is that better? I'm sorry. I don't talk very loud.
Better time?
Is that better? Okay. The box truck hit this particular pipe. It opened up the fire suppression system. It noticed a loss of pressure. It sent pressure through the pipe all the way up to the building, to the rooftop mechanical room this is the mechanical room on the roof of the building, 27 stories up. It flooded the rooftop dry fire riser. The fire riser failed and opened a pipe, and that was the only drain on the rooftop, and it was clogged. So we've got a series of failures all the way up the building there. When I got there was, you can see in this mechanical room, we've got about 12 inches of water. In the mechanical room on the roof of that building, all that water starts finding ways down into the building. This is buildings full of high-end attorneys, investment banks, people you do not want at this place. The rents of these buildings is very high. What we found, we put the fire suppression system back up, mitigation vendor responded. We immediately had to respond to each one of the tenants on every single one of the floors. We had to gather all of the lease agreements for every single one of these tenants to determine what the building owner owned, what the tenants owned. They had to put every single one of their insurance carriers on notice at that point in time. And basically I just built a spreadsheet of who every tenant is, who the insurance carrier is, what their contact is, what their claim number is, because we're going to have to work with every single one of these people in order to make a determination on what we're going to pay for them, what we went through this, we were able to put the fire suppression system back up in operation. We stopped manual fire watch at that point in time. 24 hours later, the fire riser in the basement failed and blew open and reflooded the basement area of this building.